Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. I never gave working late at night any thought. To be honest, I liked it once. The sound of mops gliding across tile floors, the silence, the murmur of the fryers winding down. Something about it felt soothing. Closing shifts are generally disliked, but for me, they were a respite from the day's turmoil. Avoid yelling children in the dining area. Not an interminable queue of frustrated patrons clamoring for sauces that you ran out of an hour ago. Nothing but quiet. That quiet that falls over you like a blanket. That used to reassure me. I would have given up right away if I had known what was in store for me that evening. Hell, I would have never turned back after burning my uniform. Let me explain how I got there, though, before I get ahead of myself. My hometown of Clearbrook, Texas, which most people only know as a gas station, halfway between Amarillo and nowhere, was where I was stuck when I was 21. Clearbrook is not very large. Everyone knows everyone, and if you include the stray dogs, there may be 6,000 people. I had been employed at Burger Barn, which is our town's, for over 2 years. The fast food restaurant has been a depressing excuse, although it wasn't flashy. It covered expenses, and nights were my only choice because I had day classes at the community college. It had been a difficult week in November. Trent, one of our recent workers, has already skipped 3 shifts without warning. The management was furious. And you know who they always called? Me. But I wasn't complaining. I needed the extra money from working more hours to pay for my tuition. At approximately 4:00 p.m., my manager Carla phoned me. Sighing, I looked at my bank app and asked if I could come in and cover another shift. I recognized the most of the crew on evenings, at least the ones who had been there for a long time, and said, "Yeah, sure. I'll be there." Mia, a friend of mine from high school, was there. She had a sardonic sense of humor that made her position at the front desk bearable. Jordan, one of the fry cooks, came next, a quiet, rather nerdy guy who never stopped wearing his headphones, even when he wasn't using them. Then there was Chris. Despite just being with us for 3 months or so, he put in a lot of work. He was a calm man in his mid-20s with short, dark hair who seemed to volunteer for the most difficult jobs without complaining. Although he wasn't particularly talkative, he was courteous when he did talk. He seemed to be the private type. Carla was also closing that evening, until 11 p.m. at the latest. Usually, she would depart after that, trusting that the rest of us would clean up and lock up by midnight. It was standard procedure. It was slower than usual when I arrived. There aren't many customers in Clearbrook during November nights. Chilly wines and the vacant streets, with everyone watching TV at home. It didn't bother me. After tying my apron and clocking in, I began stocking cups and lids. Chris was at the grill already, flipping burgers with the same steady concentration he always possessed. When I passed by, he looked up. "One more shift?" he inquired, low but not hostile voice. Yes, I did laugh. "I suppose I'm now the fallback option." He made a slight but noticeable smile. "You're better than me." We found our typical rhythm. Orders were coming in slowly, perhaps once every 10 minutes. Mia joked from behind the register. Jordan muttered a tune underneath his breath. I didn't mind that it was nearly dull. Boring was a quick way to get money. However, things started to shift at 10:30. First, there was a strange rush, roughly 10 people in 15 minutes. That's a flood for a town this small. They all appeared to be locals, but there was something strange about it. They didn't grin, or even talk, ordered, paid, and departed. It caused us to fall behind schedule. Chris, however, appeared unfazed. He worked more quickly. If anything, he moved with an almost mechanical precision. By 11 o'clock, Carla and the rush had left. I recall thinking, damn, this guy should be a chef or something. We all agreed when she threw us a "you guys got it" as she was leaving. It was not out of the ordinary. She had faith in the night crew. As she went, Mia made fun of her. After something about bringing back coffee, the four of us were alone. Our closing time was set at midnight. Cleaning the fryers, cleaning the floors, and wiping everything off took an hour. Jordan was doing dishes in the rear, while Mia began working on the lobby. As Chris disassembled the grill, I remained close to the line. Things began to feel off at that point. At first, there was nothing noticeable, just silence. To silent, Mia was no longer making jokes. Jordan had stopped humming. Even the fryer's buzz seemed far away. I tried to ignore it and concentrate on the stainless steel counters, but Chris's movements drew my attention. We were all cleaning, but he wasn't. He had something in his hand that caught his attention, something shiny and tiny, a blade. Not even one of the kitchen blades. This was not like the others. Short, surgical-looking blade. I forced a laugh and said, "Hey," as if I were going to gut a fish or something. Slowly, he glanced up at me. His black eyes made my stomach turn, not because they were dark in color. He merely gazed for a moment without responding. Then he grinned. He smiled just enough to reveal his teeth, but not very much. He whispered, "Just make sure it's sharp," unable to tolerate dull blades. I dismissed it with a laugh, since what else do you do? However, something changed within. Something wasn't right. My thoughts began to whisper. That's not how people carry knives at work. Normal people, at least, don't. I said, cool, and returned to my station. I had trembling hands. The minutes passed slowly, returning to the kitchen. Mia rolled her eyes and picked up the mop bucket. "This place already looks like a murder scene," she joked. The deep, quiet sound of Chris's laughter made my skin crawl. We were practically finished by 11:45. Mia was locking the front doors, and Jordan had already taken out the trash. Chris was simply weird. I reassured myself, and I was probably dreaming. However, as I stooped to pick up a towel, I noticed something protruding from beneath his station. A duffel bag in black. I could see what was inside because the zipper was slightly open, zip ties, duct tape, and a bottle of clear liquid, perhaps alcohol, something different, and a larger knife. My throat became parched. I slowly stood up, my heart thumping so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. Chris was observing me, not the counter, not his hands. He didn't blink his eyes. "Are you all right?" Calmly, he asked. To quiet, I did indeed croak, simply worn out. He grinned once more, the same tight grin. Nearing completion. "Then we are alone." I was hit hard by their words. Only us. At that moment, I wanted to go. Fake a call, make up an excuse, whatever. However, Mia entered again before I could speak. She said, "All locked up," and tossed the keys onto the counter. "I'm starving at last." Chris spoke without averting his gaze from me. When he said, "You should eat before you go," Mia chuckled and said, "I can make something quick." Chris grinned and said, "Hell no. I've eaten enough of this greasy crap." Expanded. "Suit yourself." I had a feeling that, if Mia lingered for one more second, things would quickly spiral out of control. I have no idea why, but I felt that way. "Hey, Mia, would you mind checking if Jordan's finished with the trash?" "I think he left the side door open," I replied, forcing a smile. Mumbled under her breath and walked away despite her moan. Chris moved closer as soon as she left. Not fast, just slow, deliberate steps, closing the distance between us. "You saw," he whispered gently. I didn't respond. I had a dry mouth. My mind cried out, "Run." My legs, however, felt like lead. He went on, "You weren't supposed to see that," in a tone that was almost kind. "But that's okay. It's better this way." That scalpel's glimmer in his palm was the last thing I saw before the lights went out. The glint of that scalpel in his hand was black, and I froze, my instincts telling me to run. But running in that darkness felt like running into a trap. I heard slow, deliberate footsteps circling the prep line, and then I heard a whisper so close I could feel his breath on my ear. "You shouldn't have looked." Something scraped down the tile, metal on floor, somewhere behind me. I don't remember thinking, but I just sprinted toward the lobby, almost falling over the mop bucket, and groped for my phone, but it dropped from my fingers and skittered under a table. I didn't dare go back for it. Chris cried out quietly, almost singing, "Come back," saying, "You'll make this more difficult than it has to be." I slammed into the front doors. They were locked, just like Mia said. My heart crashed against my ribs as I yanked at the handle anyway, knowing it was useless. "Help." I let out a yell. No response. Not from Jordan. Not from Mia. Where the devil were they? I scurried behind the bar, stooping low, clutching the edge so tightly my knuckles ached. My voice cracked so badly, it didn't sound human. Everything was engulfed in darkness, and the only light was the faint glow from the fryer, which created long, twisting shadows on the walls. Then I heard a faint hum, Chris humming, and realized that he was having fun. "Don't let me hurt you," he whispered, in a voice as quiet as a prayer, because it's nicer when they don't fight. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. My eyes flitted to the side door, Jordan's path to the dumpster, which might still be unlocked. I crawled slowly and silently along the floor, hoping my shoes' rubber sawless wouldn't squeak. My entire body burned, and then there was a thud. Jordan. I didn't let myself think, so I pushed to my feet and ran, my shoulder slamming into the side door. It gave. There was a heavy wet sound coming from the back, followed by another, and then nothing. "You can run," Chris said softly, his voice floating in the darkness, "but I'll find you." I didn't stop, not when my legs felt like they were about to give out, not when my chest was burning like fire. I staggered into the cold night air, lungs screaming, feet pounding the pavement as I tore across the empty lot. The door behind me creaked open. After running until a gas station's neon glow illuminated the horizon, I rushed through its doors, crying and barely able to say, "He's killing them." Everything that followed was a blur, with sirens, flashing lights, and questions I was barely able to comprehend. They discovered Jordan behind the store, with what was left of him packed into trash bags. Chris was gone, disappeared into the darkness as if he had never been there, and they never found him. I quit Burger Barn the following day, and a month later, I left Clearbrook. Mia was in the walk-in cooler, duct tape cutting into her wrists, barely alive. His final words were a promise, not a threat. So no matter how far I go, I always check the locks 3 times before bed. To be honest, I never gave working nights much thought. In fact, I used to enjoy them because there was a certain calm about the silence, as if the world had finally stopped rushing, and there were no phones ringing off the hook. Every time I took an overnight shift, I used to tell myself, I work as a nurse in a long-term care facility. It's not glamorous, and it's not easy, but it pays the bills. The building itself is old, older than me, probably constructed back when vinyl flooring was considered luxury. There's no bosses breathing down your neck, no family members swarming the hallways with endless questions, just me, my patients, and the hum of the vending machine down the hall. It's an L-shaped building with 3 floors and about 100 residents. Overall, my schedule is all over the place. The layout is important, especially at night, because when you're the only one on a floor, every extra hallway feels like a mile. The nursing station sits dead center, dividing the north and south wings like some sort of neutral zone. If you're new, you pick things up quickly. Fluorescent lights were popular. Everybody here does it. even though it's hard on the body to go from 6 a.m. until midnight. We joke that we're all just getting by together, and that's not far from the reality. The third floor is a different story. Nowadays, very few people are up there. One wing is completely closed for renovations, tearing out walls and repiping the plumbing, while the other wing still has a few long-term residents. As a result, the third floor is slender. There's only one nurse. That's me most of the time. I used to chuckle when people muttered that the third floor was haunted. This building has been there for decades. Many individuals have passed away here. Nurses chat. It started like any other night, and I logged in at 10:30 p.m. But I never believed in any of it because I'm a see-it-to-believe-it kind of person, or at least I was until a few weeks ago. Rumors gain legs, and before you know it, ghost stories are spreading quicker than a cold and flu season. Picked up my report and went upstairs. It was one of those icy nights when the wind howls around the building's corners as if it's trying to get in, but everything was warm and still inside, with the third floor having a faint, sterile scent of antiseptic and old linens that was comforting. As soon as I stepped off the elevator, I noticed how quiet it was, which is not unusual. The only light in the hallway spilling from the overhead fluorescents was the only source of light as I walked to the nurse's station, but beyond that, the corridors faded into shadow. The north wing was sealed off with plastic sheets and construction signs, making the entire area a dead zone. Sometimes you forget how empty this place can feel until you're standing in it alone. Just 8 hours, I thought to myself as I logged into the computer. Rest easy tonight, you've already done this. The rounds passed quickly, with the exception of Mrs. Keller, the elderly woman at the end of the hall, who never seems to sleep. The majority of my residents were asleep. The late-night commercial on her TV was illuminating her slender body as she lay in bed. When I checked her vitals, she grinned. With a voice like rustling dry leaves, she questioned, "You're here alone tonight?" "Yeah," I answered, trying to sound casual. "It's quiet, though. That's fortunate." After giving me a long glance, she spoke quietly. "It's not always wise to be quiet." As I made my way back to the station, that stuck with me. By 1 in the morning, I had made myself at home. My phone was playing a movie. TikTok was in line. Suddenly I became disinterested. The standard survival kit for the night shift. However, I had the uneasy feeling that I was being observed. The entire time, I convinced myself that was simply the loneliness playing tricks on me. Nevertheless, I continued to notice movement out of the corner of my eye. Every time I looked, I saw nothing but vacant hallways and plastic sheeting along the wing. Then it took place. I was idly scrolling in my chair when a shadow god. How can I even explain this? Dropped from the ceiling. It wasn't just any shadow, it wasn't a light-casting shadow. It lingered over me for a brief moment and was substantial, like ink dripping from above. It was gone by the time my mind absorbed what I was witnessing. I fired up so quickly that the chair swung back. My heart felt like it was trying to escape. It banged into my ribcage. Above me, nothing existed, not a thing. Only the faint sound of Mrs. Keller's TV down the hall and the buzz of the lamp fixture. No way, I told myself. The halls were quiet, every patient tucked up except for Mrs. Keller, who gave me that same unreadable expression when I peeked in. "You imagine that you're tired, that's all." I decided to do another round, so I grabbed my flashlight. "You all right?" As I turned back toward the station, I observed something that made my skin prickle. A shadow moving beneath the construction. Doors crack as if someone were standing on the other side. "Hello," I said, and she simply nodded. Even to me, my voice sounded little. There was no response, so I opened the door and shone my light through the plastic sheets, but all I saw was a dark, gutted hallway with exposed studs. I firmly closed the door, unlocked it, and when I returned to the station, I sat with my back to the window, facing the door. Since my co-worker had promised to come take a break at around 2:50 to 30, to 45, and to 55 passed, and I was still alone. I looked at the screen once more, and it said 3:03 a.m. That moment, I heard 3 gentle knocks on the window behind me. When I finally turned, I saw that the window was dark, reflecting just the empty station, and beyond it, blackness. I froze, the kind of freeze when your entire body forgets how to function. My breath held, and every hair on my neck rose up. My body responded before my brain could, and I ran out of the station and down the corridor, almost running into my coworker, getting off the elevator. "Jesus, are you okay?" There's nothing but the tree line in the darkness. This is the third story. No balcony, no fire escape, no trees close enough to reach, nothing. She grabbed my arms and shouted, "Look what happened. Have you knocked on the window? What number?" My voice broke like a teenager's. "I arrived just now," I took her word for it. Upon glancing at her face, I could tell she had no idea what I was talking about. She must have noticed my fear because she asked, "Would you like to move floors?" "Up here. I can take over." Yes, it came out too quickly and frantically, but I didn't mind. I smoked 3 consecutive cigarettes outside my car, my hands shaking so much that I dropped the lighter twice, and when I eventually returned inside, I was stuck to the second floor like glue. Neither my coworker nor I asked any questions, and when I later told another nurse what had happened, she simply nodded as if it had never happened. People hear knocks up. It's always there," she added, "with doors opening and shadows shifting. You are not unique." After what I witnessed, I wanted to convince her that ghosts aren't real and that there's always a logical explanation, but I couldn't bring myself to say it, not after what I heard. Weeks have passed since that night, and after working the 3rd floor once more, nothing has happened. However, each time I exit the elevator, I sense the weight and the silence, as if perhaps it was fatigue, perhaps my mind was playing tricks on me, but I know deep down that I've never experienced such horror, and I doubt I ever will. Some things, lurking just out of sight, not in Afghanistan, not in a combat zone where fear is a part of the job, where you carry it like your rifle, tight against your chest, always there, always ready. But what happened that night? It was different, a fear no one trains you for. I never imagined that fear could feel heavier than body armor. In my first deployment, we were based out of a small patrol outpost in Helmand Province, a sun-scorched wasteland of sand, rock, and ghost villages that looked older than time. By month 3, the routine had become ingrained: patrol, set up ops, pull security, and hope you don't step on something that blows your legs off. My name is Carter Lewis, and I was 19 years old. I recall the first day of it when our squad leader, Sergeant Morales, brought us into a temporary briefing area. The heat made the days uncomfortable and the nights worse in their own way. The evenings were cold enough to make your bones hurt and silent enough to make your ears ring. A chart was pinned to plywood, along with ammunition crates. "Listen up, gents," remarked Morales in a gruff, low voice from chain smoking. "Intel says Taliban be moving fighters near Route Sparrow. An overnight op will be set up." Observe that nobody moaned. You refrained from complaining to Morales, unless you enjoyed pushing yourself till your arms failed you. "Where is it?" Our saw gunner, Daniels, who has been my best friend since the beginning, was asked. This large, loud-mouthed, shaven-headed Marine made firefights seem like bar fights. Here, Morales poked at the map. Residents refer to it as Key Seafid, which means White Fortress or some _ancient ruins, towering walls, but are ideal for observation and have superb sightlines. Daniel sneered. "That sounds romantic." "Well," Morales remarked, "don't get too comfortable. At sunrise, we're in and out. Every 30 minutes, standard communications are checked. The Afghan border police will accompany us on our bike. Let us know the safe routes." That was important. The ABP was aware of which roads were death traps and which wadis were mined. Near Dusk. We loaded up. A Humvee with 5 of us packed in the back smelt like gun oil, sweat, and the subtle taste of blossoming terror. Our radio operator, Mason, sat next to me and checked his equipment for the 10th time. The child, who is only 20 years old, has freckles on his nose and is constantly anxious before patrols. I said, "You good?" "Yeah," he lied, his gaze darting to the far horizon. I didn't hold him responsible. The scenery appeared unreal, with miles of barren ground beneath a crimson sunset and compounds strewn around like splintered teeth. Then I spotted it, the Humvee rattling across a washboard road. The ruin, like a mirage, it emerged from the desert. The tops of the 4 tall, sun-bleached stone walls were ragged where time had worn them down. A dilapidated structure sagged, like an elderly man in the middle. "Jesus," Danielle said. "It appears to be Dracula's retreat." When we stopped short of the entrance, the ABP guys jumped out too quickly. One of them, an older man with a scar curling down his cheek, barked something imposto, waving his arms as if he wanted us to turn around. Morale snapped. "Keep your stupid comments to yourself." But even he kept looking at it as if it didn't. "Sit right." I asked Mason whether he knew enough Posto to get by, and he scowled. Daniels laughed. "Great haunted ruins. Something about a bad place. Evil spirits. Just what we need." We stepped inside after Morales, who wasn't smiling, argued with the ABP for a minute before turning to face us and saying, "They're not coming in." The Afghans climbed back into their vehicle and drove away, engines wailing, leaving us in the dark. We cleared the area first. Standard SOP. There were no indications of enemy activity, just dust, wind, and the slight smell of batchit. The walls towered 20 feet high, blotting out the air, which felt strange and heavy, like entering a room where someone had just been screaming. Morales posted security on the corners, set up communications with base, and laid it out simply to men, per post, 2-hour shifts, stay alert. By the time darkness engulfed the desert, it was my turn to be on watch with Daniels, and we climbed up onto the wall, the night vision goggles turning everything ghost green. It was hell of a situation. Perspective, Daniels whispered, looking across the dark ocean of sand. "Yeah," I replied, but my stomach ached. There was a thickness to the silence, as if the air were holding its breath. Minutes crawled. 2 o'clock. "You see that?" He raised his NVGs. "Where?" "Along the wall." And I paused because what I saw wasn't a man. Then something moved. "Daniels," I murmured. "Holy _ Daniels mumbled. "What the?" He ripped off his goggles, rubbed his eyes, and looked again, but it was gone. It was a tall, thin shape, wrapped in material that fluttered without wind, and it glided along the wall like smoke, not walking, nor running, just there. "Don't say dust." "Perhaps." And that wasn't dust, I snapped. After that, we didn't speak, just watched as every nerve burned. I truly tried to fall asleep when our shift was over, curling up against my pack and holding a rifle across my chest while listening to the night chew at the quiet. My pulse leapt at every sound, a shifting stone, a hiss of sand, and then I woke up or thought I did, finding something heavy on my chest that was choking the air out of me. My eyes snapped open, and there it was, a figure, completely dark, squatting low, its head inches from mine. I attempted to scream, but nothing came out of my mouth. It was like invisible hands clamping over my lips. Panic surged through me, and I fought for my knife, but my arms wouldn't move. There was just darkness, no face, no eyes. They were pinned, and as it moved forward, I bit down hard on nothing on air, because I could feel the weight of it burning into my ribs and my breath, feeling cold like winter steel cascading over my face. Rifle snapped up. "Carter." What the _ I couldn't answer, could not breathe. Then the weight disappeared. My arms flew free. A scream ripped from my throat, a harsh, broken gasp that made Daniel spring awake. The others gathered, their faces pallid even in the faint glow of the chem lights, and I told them everything. They didn't laugh or call underscore, because they all acknowledged that they had felt it to the eyes, the watching, the wrongness. We didn't sleep after that, with our rifles at the ready, our backs to the crumbling walls. We sat in a tight circle, waiting for dawn and sunrise. When the light finally arrived, it felt like the desert was breathing again, and we packed up, quickly, with no one talking and our eyes darting like prey. As we hauled ours back to base, Morales said flatly, "We're never going back there. I've been home for 8 years, have a wife, a child, and a job that doesn't require breaking down doors. But on some nights, when the house is dark and the silence feels too deep, I wake up with that weight on my chest, and every time I bite down hard, just in case." I never imagined that working as an EMT would teach me how thin the line between normal and nightmare could be. This was 10 years ago. The real job involves lengthy periods of waiting, paperwork, and driving through streets that most people avoid after dark. For me, those streets were in East Haven, a city on the outskirts of Southern California's urban sprawl, while flashing lights, CPR, and rushing patients to the hospital are certainly part of the job description. The real job entails much more. For about a year, I had been working evenings. At first, I chose to do so because I enjoy the silence. At 1 a.m., the city seemed different, less judgment, less noise, just the buzz of streetlights, the scent of asphalt, and the faint throb of faraway traffic. I was 27 years old, burned out from my brief stint at nursing school, and working as an EMT felt like redemption, saving lives, or at least trying to, gave me something nursing never did. You learn to love that stillness because it makes the chaos easier to handle when it comes. However, that night reminded me that the stillness can lie. It can hide things that shouldn't exist in the first place. We were both scheduled for the 12-hour graveyard shift, which ran from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., and my partner, Erica, had been in the field for 6 years, so she was calm, quick, and unflappable. She had the ability to crack a joke while applying pressure to an arterial bleed. Tuesday, which meant slow until it wasn't. We had just cleared a non-emergency transfer, a middle-aged woman with tightness in her chest who was fine after a series of tests, and our rig was parked outside St. Alden's Medical Center, a mid-sized emergency room that never seemed to sleep and smelled of disinfectant and cheap coffee that tastes like regret, routine stuff. We finally got the go-ahead to take her home at 12:55 a.m. The woman, Lydia, hardly talked during the ride, and her address was Buford Street, an area that even police officers joked about avoiding unless their radios pushed them there. 50, weak. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, deep and angry, and Erica helped her inside while I carried her medications in a brown paper bag. The house smelled faintly of menthol cigarettes and rose lotion. The porch light flickered as if it were struggling to stay alive when we pulled into her driveway. Two rusted cars sat in the yard, weeds creeping up their tires. I made an effort not to look at the yellowed family portraits or the drooping couch cushions. "Are you okay, ma'am?" "Been worse," Lydia mumbled. And that was that. Erica queried in a light tone, and Lydia nodded. It was 1:07 a.m. when we turned onto Divincia Avenue, a long stretch of cracked pavement where street lights hummed like angry bees. To our right, Langley Block, also known among first responders as the Market, a nickname for the type of business done there. Hookers, pimps, dealers, all the things you don't want to stumble into when you're tired and unarmed. We left, pulling away slowly, because kids occasionally darted out between parked cars and neighborhoods like this, even at night. We parked against the flow of traffic on Ellery Street, 1 block over from the action, safer, comparatively speaking. Erica rubbed her temple and said, "Let's find a spot. If I don't finish this charting, I'm screwed." "Cool," I said, looking for a safe curb that didn't exist. I got out to clean the gurney and restock supplies while Erica typed away in the passenger seat. her face pale from the glow of the onboard computer. Azure. It was cool, almost moist, and there was a quietness that was heavier than sound. My instinct told me to do this as soon as possible. That's when it hit, sharp like a blade through silence. A girl's voice, shrill, desperate. No, no, give me a break. Then a man shouted out, "You can't take her," 2 or 3 doors down. Erica's head jerked up from the laptop, and I paused, rag in hand, my brain performing that slow motion thing, where it attempts to determine whether or not it really heard what it heard. We looked at each other, her eyes wide and alert. "You heard that," I murmured. "Yes." She held her fingers over the radio and said, "Where the fuck?" And motor screamed before I could respond. Headlights blazed down the block, blinding us and aimed directly at us. It sounded like rage on 4 wheels. "Move." When Erica yelled, I didn't think and instead followed instinct. I jumped into the taxi and slammed into her lap as she pulled the passenger door. "Jesus Christ," I gasped, my heart thumping against my ribs as if it wanted to escape. And a second later, a grey sedan screamed past, so close I felt the whoosh of air. A bald Hispanic man behind the wheel, his head and arms inked, casual as hell, flicking out a cigarette. 1 more second later, the sedan tore down the street through the windshield. Outside the car, another man in tidy whites, barefoot, clinging to the roof rack with one hand and smashing his fist against the rear window with the other, his feet scraping the door as the car swerved. Chaos, raw and surreal. A girl, maybe 19, in the back seat, her underwear only, her hair tangled, her mascara streaked like rivers, her eyes wide with fear, pounding on the glass. Similar to witnessing a scene that was filmed without authorization. Lights up, Erica slapped the sirens on the whale, splitting the night, and I cried, "Dispatch, Medic 42, we've got a possible abduction in progress." Breathless, I grabbed the radio. We followed, unarmed, 2 women in an ambulance chasing a felon. At 1 a.m. Ellery and Divinia were in a grey 4-door sedan. "Don't lose it," Erica muttered, and they had already pulled into the lane. The driver didn't even bat an eye at the sirens. He rolled up to a 4-way stop like he had all the time in the world, flicked another cigarette, looked at us in the mirror, and then drove off, leaving the tires squealing as he cut left hard. The sedan vanished down Franklin Street, the half-naked man clinging like a spider as the car weaved. Then he lost control, hit the pavement, rolled, scrambled to his feet, and ran. A few seconds later, the girl flew out as well, tumbling in, a tangle of skin and limbs, and they fled toward a huge power transformer at the corner, disappearing into the darkness. Erica pulled over and mumbled, "No plate, just temp tags flapping in the wind." __shit. With my hands quivering from adrenaline and my medical pack draped over my back, I leapt out and said, "You grab the bag, I'll keep eyes." Scanning. I went to the transformer. It was empty, just the sound of the hum of electricity. I yelled, "They're gone," into the radio. We lost visual. Sirens sounded in the darkness. Like cavalry, 5 squad cars rolled in. We revealed everything. The vehicle, the altercation, the near miss, the chase, the girl and the guy. With flashlights cutting through alleys, officers spread out. A voice crackled over their channel. 5 minutes later, to patients that fit the description, were assigned to Unit 32. 1 woman and 1 man. I felt a wave of relief before the officer turned back to face us. Unreadable face. They claimed that nothing took place. What? Erica blinked. They deny everything. No driver, no car, no chase. Claims that they were merely strolling. I blurted in their panties. Indeed, he stated bluntly. Furthermore, no charges are being brought. I muttered, road rash doesn't lie, not important. No crime, no complaint. It's wonderful to clear, ladies. And that was it. Case closed on my career's most bizarre near-death encounter. Silently, we drove back. Streets are deserted, as if nothing had happened, sirens dead. However, my hands continued to shake, because nights like these are really like that. Broken bones and blood are not what haunt you. It's the queries that will never be responded to. Who was he? She was in the car, but why? What nearly did we see? Then there was the worst one, which kept me awake for weeks. What if her scream hadn't been heard? I never imagined that a profession might alter my perspective on the dark. However, I also never imagined that I would be working the graveyard shift at a metal recycling yard. I'm 33 years old and go by Ethan Cole. Additionally, I didn't actually plan for this employment, like the majority of people who wind up doing night security. I was driven into it by life. I was a construction worker before this, steady hours, nice crew, good pay. However, my knee was injured in an on-site accident last year. I was cleared for light-duty job after months of physical therapy and surgery. The issue was that my previous employer didn't have enough light-duty positions, so they let me leave. I thought, how hard could it be when I saw an advertisement for night security at a salvage yard because I had a lot of bills to pay. It's more difficult than I anticipated. The yard is located in western Kentucky on the outskirts of Brookhaven, a tiny industrial town. The front office wouldn't tell you. Big glass windows, a tidy small building, and a reception desk that hasn't likely had a real receptionist in months. But it's like entering a different universe after you pass through the main gate. 20-foot high piles of wrecked automobiles. The floodlights glinted on sheets of jagged metal. Forklifts parked like giants in slumber. No matter how much you wash your clothes, the smell of rust, oil, and a hint of sourness lingers in the air. During the night, only one guard is on duty. Me, Frank Doyle, the site manager, gave me a tour of the work when I first started. His voice sounds like gravel rolling in a bucket, and he's an elderly man in his late 50s with fingers stained with nicotine. Cole, you will detest the first week. Frank, at night, the yards are like a horrible maze. You'll grow accustomed to it, but every shadow appears to be moving, and every sound is like someone skulking up behind you. I recall giggling uneasily. Me, I suppose I'll continue to carry the flashlight. So, that and your phone. Frank, you call me first if you notice something strange. Don't act like a hero here. Several places where someone can hide. Additionally, ignore anything you hear in the bushes outside the rails. That final section stayed with me. Don't bother. The first week wasn't very noteworthy. Boredom thick enough to choke on, lengthy hikes, and frigid nights. I had to complete a full round every hour, use a small RFID scanner to scan checkpoints, and ensure that no one had snuck in to remove steel or copper catalytic converters. The far checkpoint was the biggest pain in the ass. Across some train tracks that went beyond the yard's edge and over an area of overgrown grass, I was always uncomfortable in that area. About 100 yards away is a warehouse, broken windows, and a corroded corrugated steel skeleton. The business requires me to take a picture of it each time to demonstrate that I checked, even though it has been vacant 4 years. People like to squat in there. Frank, a fire caused by a junkie attempting to make meth is the last thing we need. The knee-high grass next to the tracks conceals a variety of trash. Broken glass, sharp metal fragments, and occasionally even a dead animal. You risk slicing your boots open if you don't watch your stride. I purchased a military flashlight with 2,000 lumens. If you pointed it long enough, it could burn a hole through the night. To be honest, the only thing that kept me sane during those rounds was that light. I was beginning to feel more at ease by the second week. I had a routine: get a coffee at the 24-hour gas station on Main, then head to the yard to check the cameras, make my rounds, and spend the next hour scrolling through my phone. Simple money. I was completely mistaken. Wednesday was the day. The sky was clear, there was no wind, and it was cold, the kind that seeps into your bones if you remain there for too long. My clock-in time was 11 p.m. as usual. Crisp. The first round went without a hitch. The second round. It was soon after 1 a.m. when I began the third. Everything changed at that point. I felt it while I was making my way back from the warehouse. After taking the picture, you're not alone, despite the prickling sensation at the back of your neck. I persuaded myself it was nothing at first. A raccoon in the grass, most likely, a stray dog, perhaps. However, the sensation intensified, became heavier, and felt like eyes staring into my back. I paused. The only sound in the yard was the distant buzz of the highway. I held out the flashlight, its beam glinting off corroded steel and slicing through the grass. Nothing. Hello. I spoke too loudly. The words "no answer" were hardly audible, but I resumed my pace, my boots crunching on the gravel path. Like a pendulum, the light swung back and forth. I could hear my heart pounding so loudly in my ears. I saw him at that point. An elderly man was sitting on a metal folding chair about 10 yards distant, right past the tracks. God forbid I hadn't. I saw him a few minutes ago when I was passing by. He had deep creases etched onto his pale face, and he was emaciated, almost skeleton. His eyes were shaded by a tattered cowboy hat, and a long, dirty white beard cascaded down his chest. He was wearing only a pair of filthy overalls, if you could call them that. Bare skin showing through the straps, no shirt. His knees held his hands. Fingers. He was staring directly at me, and jerking a little. I had a mental short circuit. Run, my instinct told me, but my legs remained immobile. "Sir," I stammered, "this is private property. You can't." I dropped my flashlight before I could finish. With a clatter, it struck the ground and slid, sending the beam hurtling out from us into the grass. The world turned dark. There was nothing for a while. Just me, crouching in the dark with my fingers fumbling for the flashlight. No sound, no movement. Then I heard heavy, quick footsteps approaching me directly. Underfoot, metal fragments, crunched like shattered glass. I could feel the ground trembling since the blast was so close. Expecting to see the old man lunging for me, I whipped the flashlight around and jerked it toward me, but he wasn't there. The footsteps swerved to the left, racing past me and vanishing into the tangle of rubble. There was silence when I heard him crash through the bushes at the yard's edge. He was gone in an instant. For what seemed like an age, I stood there. Every muscle was tensed, and my breath was hazy in the chilly air. My hands were shaking so much that I could hardly hold the light. When I finally moved, I spread the beam all over. I saw nothing except countless shards of metal flashing like teeth. No man, no tracks. I returned to the office and shut the door after slamming it. My digits made a mess of calling Frank Groggy Cole. Why in the world are you phoning at 1:30? Me. Someone is out there. An elderly man. He suddenly appeared and dashed into the yard. "Did you call the police, Frank?" "Nee, not quite yet. Do it, Frank. I'm en route." It was 20 minutes before the police arrived. The entire yard was searched. Nothing, not even a hint. The only object they discovered was a lone metal chair near the tracks that faced them. I didn't complete my shift. Hell, I nearly didn't return at all. Here's what still bothers me, though. That chair, we didn't have it. And occasionally, on a bright, chilly night, I swear I can sense eyes on me once more. In a rich suburb, I work the night shift at a high-end hotel, and I still get shivers from what happened in room 217. The time was around 9:15 p.m. when the front desk phone rang. As usual, I was by myself. The only sounds in the lobby were the ticking of the clock above the coffee station and the soft hum of the air conditioner. Only 10 of the hotel's 75 rooms were occupied. The post-pandemic slump is to blame. This is Claire at the front desk. "How may I assist you?" My stomach clenched at the voice on the other end. "I need assistance." The voice was that of a man, dry and raspy, like sandpaper being dragged across concrete. Behind his remarks, I could detect a little, irregular breathing that sounded almost deliberate. "Sure," I answered, trying to sound courteous. "What do you require assistance with?" Slowly, he said, "My TV, the loudness, it doesn't function. Have you used the remote's volume button?" I inquired. Indeed, a pause. "After that, it functions. I simply don't get it." I was momentarily confused by that. The TV remote was never the subject of complaints, but Wi-Fi, thermostats, and even shower pressure were all right, no issue. "If you bring the remote down to the front desk, I'll be pleased to show you, or I can walk you through it over the phone." "You come up," he said. "Show me." There was something about his voice. The words flat, firm, almost commanding made my heart race. I politely stated that I was the sole person on duty. "Although I truly can't leave the desk alone, if you bring the remote, what kind of service is this?" he asked, his voice growing sharper, still quiet, but suddenly sharp. "You have 2 minutes to stay at your workstation. A horrible hotel." I took a swallow. He was only on the 2nd floor, and I didn't need a negative review. 2 minutes for one short trip. "Okay," I said at last. "Right there, I'll be." 217. I took the master key, looked at the deserted corridors and security monitors, and went upstairs. When I exited the elevator, the 2nd level was silent, the carpet dampening my footfall. There was a slight odor of bleach and old perfume in the air. The ubiquitous sign was flipped out on every door I passed. Except for 217, the room was deserted. I paused before it, brushed my suit, and wrapped. I contacted guest services, speaking softly, nothing at first. Then I heard a voice within, soft and muffled, like if he were speaking to someone else. I waited. There was too much muttering. At last, I heard the deadlock slide open with a metallic click. The door cracked an inch slowly. Aside from the TV's blue glow, the room beyond was completely dark. There was a subdued volume. "Hi." I forced a smile. A faint, raspy voice said, "I'm Claire from the front desk." My skin crawled as I said, "Come inside." "Sweetheart," I went cold. "Sir, if you hand me the remote, I can show you from here." His voice was rougher now. "Easier if you come in," he added. Every instinct said, no, yet I bent just far enough to turn on the light switch inside the entryway. "Come inside." When I saw him, the lamps were blazing. He was standing close to the bed, 6 feet back. White hair, pale skin that sags over bones, a weak, wiry body, and no shirt. The ends of his belt were hanging loosely from his dark pants. The zipper was not fastened, my throat constricted. He held up the remote like a sacrifice and said, "Show me." I remained in the doorway. I hurriedly pointed to the volume buttons here without interfering. He looked at me for a while, then he grinned. It's not a pleasant smile, something that slowly curved but missed his eyes. "Come in," he said in a whisper. I said in a strained voice, "I really can't. Simply click this link." "You're not entertaining," he murmured. His eyes sparkled. Unlike the others, I felt sick to my stomach. "Others." With a trembling voice, I said, "You're all set. Enjoy your evening." And I firmly closed the door, only until I was back at the front desk with the door secured behind me. Did I take a breath? I tried to pour coffee, but my hands were shaking so much that I spilled it. He was just a harmless old pervert who had rented a cheap room and intended to get his kick off by frightening the girl at the desk, I reminded myself. However, the phone rang once again 2 hours later, only until I was back at the front desk, and the glass door was secured behind me did I take a breath. I nearly dropped the key card on the counter because my hands were shaking so much. He was only a lonely guy attempting to frighten me, I thought myself. I had previously dealt with weirdos, drunks, and cheats. It was nothing new, but there was something about him. My chest tightened at the way he grinned. and the way his voice changed from gentle to sharp. I gazed at the second-floor security monitor. There is no movement in the hallway. My heart continued to pound. To help me relax, I poured myself some coffee, but my hand shook so much that the cup spilled. "Calm down," I muttered. "Just get through the night." However, the phone rang again 2 hours later. I went cold. I quickly glanced at the caller ID, 217. I allowed it to ring twice. It was dry in my throat when I lifted it up, I said, attempting to sound normal. "Front desk." The voice rasped. "Claire." My blood became icy. I hadn't revealed my name to him. I did force myself to leave. He muttered to the TV, "I still need help." Through the line came a quiet laugh. Deliberate, but not loud. "Number with you." My skin pricked. "Sir, if you need assistance, you'll have to come to the front desk." "I like seeing you at my door," he said. "I can't do that," I remarked in a stern tone. "Pretty little thing. You should come back up." Silence. I believed the call had ended for a long time. He answered. "Then you locked your office." His voice was sarcastic and light. "Well done, girl." I felt sick to my stomach. How was that known to him? The cameras. I quickly glanced at the footage from the monitor. All the halls appeared deserted. In my ears, my heartbeat thudded. I broke my voice and said, "I'm ending this call." He gave a quiet laugh. "Don't, you'll make me feel bad." With trembling hands, I slammed the phone down and dialed 911. 911. "What emergency do you have?" "At the West Bridge Inn. This is Claire." I mumbled, "Room 217. I'm being harassed by the guest. He's constantly phoning." "Right now, are you safe?" "I am in a locked office." "Yes. Remain there. Officers are en route." I was overcome with relief until I heard it. Click. The lobby door is unlocking. I froze as I slowly turned toward the glass doors. He was in, standing at the doorway as if he were a resident. Grey hair unkempt, a pale breast uncovered, and jeans that hang low with the belt undone. His icy, grey, and flat eyes were fixed on mine. How did he enter without the alarm going off? He made his way over to the desk, measured and sluggish. The phone fell out of my grasp. "Stay away," I screamed, reaching for anything to protect myself. He grinned and cocked his head. That terrible smile that curls up. The door shouldn't have been locked. He gave a raspy sound, made me put in more effort. I hurried inside the back office, through the deadbolt, and shut the door. I almost missed it because my hands trembled so badly. I picked up the desk phone and dialed 911 once more. Busy indication. The office door was gently knocked on. "My dear." At this point, his voice was singing. "Avoid hiding. Daddy will be upset. With you." My breath caught. I quickly glanced at the cameras. The screen wavered, then static turned black. Each and everyone. I muttered to no one, "Please." The door was scraped by something. Wood on metal. With my heart racing, I looked. Around the office, under the counter, was a maintenance hammer. I held it, my knuckles white. And then there was stillness. Nothing, no voice, no knocking. After dragging minutes, sirens sounded. Louder at first, fainter at first. The lobby was dark, with flashing red and blue lights. Officers. There was a bark. I nearly passed out from relief. I stumbled out into two officers as soon as I unlocked the office. He was here, I said in a start. He tried to. The man from 217. There was no one in room 217. Nothing, no bag, no clothes. "Is this the correct room? Are you sure?" One cop frowned as he inquired. "Yes," I exclaimed. The second officer displayed the master lock override and said, "He just came into the lobby." When we got there, this door was secured from the inside. My mouth became parched. "Madam, there isn't," he spoke softly. Indication of forced entry. My gaze was fixed on the cameras. All feeds were operational. Again. Then I noticed it on the second floor monitor at the far end of the corridor. The door to room 217 is slowly closing. The building was searched. They looked in every room and stairs and found nothing. Since there was no name, there was no guest record under his name, a prepaid card, and a phony ID we used to make the online reservation for 217. No security footage of him coming in or going out, as if he didn't exist. 2 days later, I gave up. However, I swear I can still hear that voice when my phone rings late at night. Sweetheart, come in. I never imagined that a profession might alter my perspective on the world. I only wanted a paycheck when I first started working at the airport. I was 22 years old, just out of high school, and in dire need of a steady job. At the time, my mother had 2 jobs. I had previously cycled through a couple fast food jobs that made me despise people even more when my dad left when I was 10 years old. The airport appeared to be different. Benefits, security, structure, etc. It was never intended to last. But when you're working evenings, years tend to fly by. I've been watching automobiles go through the exit gates at GF Coast Regional Airport for 20 years, and I'm 40 to now. My employment is peaceful most evenings. Just me, waving at weary commuters on their way home from a toll station. Safe, dependable, and quiet. I used to believe that, at least. There's a rhythm to graveyard shifts. People often fear that working nights will drive them insane, but eventually, it becomes normal. Eating dinner around 4 a.m. caused my body to become accustomed to sleeping during the day, and conversing with strangers more often than relatives. At first, I really enjoy the silence. Throughout the day, the airport has its own pulse. Families shouting because they're late to board, carts zipping over the tarmac, and planes screaming overhead. However, the entire place exhales as midnight approaches. The sound subsides. The world becomes silent. Only a handful of us are out there. The skeleton personnel inside the terminal, the toll booth attendants, and the midnight maintenance men. You begin to feel like a ghost yourself, floating through voids that nobody else seems to notice. However, calm does not always equate to silence. Quietness can sometimes lead to unwelcome noises. My manager gives me the task of inventorying the parking garage once a week or so, making sure that no cars have been abandoned, and recording license plate information for our records. I detest those evenings. In an inexplicable way, the garage is eerie. There are 5 stories, including the roof. It feels odd the higher you go, but the lower floors aren't too unpleasant. The 4th level is the worst. Even in summer, it's always colder than the others. Occasionally, the lights flicker as if they are unsure whether to remain on. It's just my brain playing tricks. I've told myself 100 times. That's what empty spaces do to you. However, I have a gut feeling that something is wrong with that level. The night that proved it then arrived. In late January. It was a Tuesday. That night was colder than normal, at about 42, although Florida winters aren't particularly harsh. My radio crackled as I sipped lukewarm coffee in my booth, bundled up in a black jacket and gloves. "Are you there, Lisa?" My manager, Rick, was there. I pressed the button and said, "Yes, go ahead, on level 4. I got a silver sedan. I've been there for at least 3 days. Plate begins with HKT. I need you to log it." I tried not to moan aloud as I said, "Copy, level 4, naturally." After attaching my torch to my jacket and grabbing my portable computer, I made my way to the elevator. When I entered the garage, it was silent. Only the distant whir of ventilation fans and the hum of fluorescent lights. As I traveled up, the elevator shuttered as if it were just hanging on, and my boots echoed on the concrete. I paused as the level 4 doors opened. This place had colder air, not simply cold, like if someone had opened the door of a freezer. After pulling my jacket tighter, I went outside. It was nearly deserted. Shadows gathered between the concrete columns, a few cars strewn all over the floor, with a torch in one hand and a portable in the other. I began to stroll while tapping in license plate numbers. Every time the scanner beeped, it sounded like a gunshot. Before I met her, I had persuaded myself that it would be another dull evening by the time I arrived at the northwest corner. She was standing close to the concrete barrier that looked out over the street below. At the edge of the garage, I initially believed she was a traveler waiting for a ride, but I soon noticed something wasn't right. The weather wasn't appropriate for her attire. White shorts, shoulder-length black hair, and a baby blue short-sleeve top. The temperature was 42. She was dressed as though it were mid-July, whereas I was freezing in a jacket. "Oh, ma'am," in the silence. My voice was too loud. She remained still. She didn't even look. With each stride, my heart pounded more forcefully as I moved closer. I said, "You can't be up here. The garage has been shut down for the evening." Nothing. She simply stood there with her arms drooping at her sides and her hair rustling a little in the wind from the exposed edge. I saw then that she had pale skin, not merely light complexion, paper pale. I blinked after that. She had left. She was there for a moment. The next blank area. There were no footsteps, noises, or squeaks coming from the sliding door by the elevator that led to the foyer. I made a complete circle. A flashlight beam piercing the darkness. "Hi there." This time, my voice broke. Nothing. Only the blood pounding in my ears and the hum of the lights. With my breath coming quickly, I retreated toward the elevator. I hurried inside as soon as the doors opened, almost dropping the handheld. My hands were shaking by the time I returned to the booth. When I entered the break room, Rick and the others were there. They were laughing at something on TV, and I could still hear the sound bouncing off my ears. "Hey," I murmured, trying to sound solid. "Did anyone witness a woman with black hair, a blue top, and white shorts pass through security tonight?" They all gave me a look that suggested I had changed my mind. "Nope," answered Rick after a pause. And I asked them, "Why?" The whole story. They were silent for a moment before they burst out laughing. "It's 2 o'clock in the morning, Lisa." I wanted to disagree, but I was at a loss for words when one of the guys replied, "You need coffee or a nap or both." That she simply disappeared. That something was pushing down on me, and the air felt strange. I simply stopped talking, wrapped up my work, and left for home. It was 3 weeks ago, and she hasn't left my thoughts. I sense it every time I enter the garage, especially level 4. My chest was pressed by that weight, that squirmy feeling beneath my skin. I've begun to pay more attention and double-check my surroundings. There are moments when I swear I hear quiet, soft footsteps following me, keeping pace with me. However, when I turn around, I see there is nothing there. For a brief moment last night, I believed I saw her reflection behind me in the elevator doors. That was the last time I slept. Tonight, I have another job. Can you guess Rick's destination? Level 4. Additionally, for the first time in decades, I'm considering giving up. It never occurred to me that living in the country would make me feel less secure than in the city. I believed I was leaving behind the traffic, the noise, and the drunks shouting outside my window when I moved out of my former Raleigh apartment 2 years ago. That life was over for me. I needed a place where I could breathe, someplace slower and peaceful. When the warehousing position became available, I hopped on it up right outside Willow Creek, a small town. Although working nights wasn't my favorite, the pay was higher than anything I had ever earned in the city. I could now finally afford a place of my own thanks to the income increase. On a leasing website, I discovered Meadow Creek Apartments. The advertisement featured a faded picture of an L-shaped building with flaking paint and read, "Quiet country living." Wasn't pretty, but it was affordable and near my place of employment. The day I moved in, I realized how remote it was. 3 miles from the closest town, encircled by woods and cornfields, with only a few farmhouses dotted along the road. There was no gas station, no shops, just a crunch of gravel beneath my tires as I pulled into the lot. There were 8 units in total, 4 on top, 4 on. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and for the first few months it was ideal. I'd get home around 6 in the morning. My flat was upstairs at the far end, with a living room that smelled vaguely of old carpet cleaner, a little kitchen, and 1 bedroom, with the exception of Tyler and to-be, who worked construction and were usually smoking outside when I got home. It was always quiet. We would nod and occasionally talk about football or the weather. He was a nice guy, maybe in his mid-30s, like me, and he always wore the same camouflage hat, which is what made him. It was a Monday, and I had worked 3rd shift the previous evening, stocking pallets for 8 hours. I was so tired when I arrived home that morning that I kicked off my boots, dropped my keys on the counter, and slumped on the couch. I didn't even make it to my bedroom, just lay there. It was 2:30 p.m. I had errands to run, groceries, petrol, all the dull stuff, and I was closing my door when Tyler came out of his apartment. I woke up to sunlight beaming through the blinds and my mouth feeling like sandpaper. A box fan was buzzing in the corner till sleep drew me under. He remarked, "Hey, guy," as if he had been anticipating my arrival. "Hey," I continued, "you got a minute?" "Yes, of course." He said, "You were out late last night, huh?" After he paused. I answered hesitantly, I was at work." "No, I mean after that. Like I scowled after you got home." "I didn't. I worked until 6 o'clock, returned right away, and crashed." "Why?" Tyler stroked his chin. "Last night, there was just 1 person outside your window." I stared at him, thinking it was you at first, but it looked like they were tampering with the screen. "Which window?" "Your living room. Perhaps about 1:30 a.m. You sure?" "Pretty sure. I was smoking." Whoever it was ducked around the corner when I glanced in their direction. I managed a shrug. "Most likely some, yeah," he answered, seeming unconvinced. "Just thought you should know," said the inebriated moron. I answered, "Thanks," and headed to my car, but his comments kept coming back to me during the trip into town. There was someone at my window at 1:30 a.m. while I was at work. The sky was becoming black and orange by the time I got home that evening. Crickets were yelling in the fields, and the red truck that I had seen earlier that week was still parked close to the dumpsters. There was no one inside, so I tried to shrug it off as I brought my groceries upstairs. I put the food away, turned on the TV, and let the sound fill the silence. By 11:30, I was ready to crash, so I flicked the TV off, and the apartment fell silent. It could have been a shadow. Tyler was mistaken, or he had had a few beers. As I headed up the stairs to my bedroom, it happened. I halted halfway up the stairs, every nerve burning, and gazed into the darkness below, waiting for another sound. 30 seconds went by, then 40, nothing. There was a huge thud coming from the living room. It wasn't a creak, nor was it the refrigerator rotating. I turned to continue when the glass shattered, not just cracked, but exploded, and I spun around as fragments poured onto the floor. I finally convinced myself it was nothing. Old building, strange noises. A form was entering through my living room window. He was about 5'10" with a wiry sweatshirt pulled tight over his face, and I didn't think until I sprinted down the stairs, bare feet slipping on carpet, and there he was, halfway through the window. He hit the floor hard, rolled, and rose up in one motion, and I froze. But it wasn't his stature that chilled me to the bone. It was the grin, paralyzingly wide. "Get the hell out of my house," I said, my voice breaking, and he simply stood there, grinning. Then I noticed the knife in his hand, and I realized that one more step would kill me. "If you were at work tonight," he said calmly, almost casually, "this wouldn't have happened. I knew it. You take one more step, I'll kill you," I shouted, my throat dry. I felt sick to my stomach since he knew. look since he knew he had been observing me. I hurried upstairs to my bedroom, 2 at a time, and slammed the door. There was no lock, but I had a better option, my Smith & Wesson 45 on the bedside table. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. Her words stuck in my head. What's your emergency? There's a man in my house, and he has a knife. I'm upstairs. Officers are on their way. If your door opens before they arrive, you are within your legal rights to protect yourself. Minutes passed like hours. There was silence downstairs, and then I heard sirens in the distance. I raced to the window, threw it open, and cried, "Up here," knowing that if your door opens before they arrive, I would be sitting there with my rifle pointing at the door and my heart thumping like a war drum. The second floor. Remain in place. A voice called, "We're on our way in." I heard the front door slam open as I threw out my keys. "Drop the knife. Get down on the ground." An officer called 2 minutes later and said, "You're fine. Come on down." I crept downstairs with my legs like jelly, and there he was, being led out in handcuffs. What stopped me, though, was not that they had captured him, but rather that they had discovered him sitting on my couch with a knife on the floor and a smile on his face. "Why was he in my home? We were hoping you could tell us," she said, looking at me and then back at the door where they'd taken him. I never received a response. I never imagined that working at night cleaning offices would make me doubt everything I thought I knew about reality. Looking back, I wonder if I missed too many warning signs. My name is Leah Martinez, and I was renting a small apartment on the outskirts of Brookfield, a mid-sized city in upstate New York, 3 years ago. They say that your gut knows before your mind does, but when you're broke, desperate, and clinging to any chance to keep the lights on, your gut gets quieter. Survival drowns it out. After he got a good job at a metal fabrication plant, my husband Chris and I moved there. For a while, we were okay, not wealthy, but managing. Then the plant laid off half of its employees, including Chris, and he tried to find another job. But Brookfield isn't a city of opportunities. We were spending down our meager funds as the weeks stretched into months. I was working part-time at a grocery store, earning maybe $300 a week after taxes, and the rent alone was $850. You can figure it out. Each month felt like a game of Russian roulette. Which bill could we skip this time? When my friend informed me about a night shift cleaning job, I was so overcome with dread. She sipped her coffee as if she were giving me a golden ticket, saying, "It pays more than the store, and it's easy. Offices downtown, nobody bothers you." It seemed wonderful. Better compensation, quieter work, and perhaps enough extra to keep us afloat. Night hours, often from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., were the catch, and Chris detested the thought. "You going around empty buildings at night by yourself?" I assured him, half lying, "It's not by myself," and he scowled. "They assigned partners." In all honesty, I wasn't sure, but what other option did I have? I would have to sell my car or lose the apartment. 2 days later, Bright Star Cleaning Services employed me. When I first entered Riverpoint Tower, I was struck by how quiet it was. Not peaceful, dead quiet, but dead quiet. Even the hum of the air vents seemed far away. It was one of those sleek, contemporary glass buildings that look beautiful by day, but become eerie monoliths at night. It loomed over downtown like a watchful eye, with 12 stories of tinted windows reflecting the city lights. During the day, the building housed accountants, tech firms, and lawyers. At night, it was a cemetery of empty desks and glowing monitors. The company kept cleaning supplies in a small room near the lobby. Security kept watch from behind a glass desk. The interior was all steel and glass, clean lines, and minimalist decor. That night, it was Frank, a grizzled man in his 60s with thinning white hair and the kind of face that had seen too much. "A single guard is typically an older man with a coffee cup glued to his hand," he said. "You're new," without raising his gaze from his screens. I answered, "Yeah, Leah," attempting to sound assured. His eyes darted to the elevator as he nodded slowly to me. "Be careful on 8, I said. Stopped in the middle of a step. "Please pardon me." He drank his coffee and murmured, "Nothing. Don't stay too long, though. At midnight, the lights go out." I tried to laugh, but his voice wasn't light-hearted. My nighttime companion called in sick. The manager told me that was all right. "Leah, you'll be okay. Simply follow the timetable, down to the top floor. When you're finished, lock up." I was there at 8:15 p.m. shoving a cart full of cleaning goods into a big metal coffin-like elevator that buzzed. Floors 10 through 12 operated smoothly. I worked fast, vacuum, empty bins, and clean desks. There was a slight smell of stale coffee and paper in the offices. I had the impression that I was floating in a sea of stars as the city lights glistened through the glass walls. I arrived at the 9th floor at 10:45. I sensed it at that moment. Have you ever entered a space and thought that someone else is already there? It was that way. The air felt more dense. My footfall became more distinct, reverberating through the glass hallway as though I were calling out to an invisible presence. I heard it as I was in the middle of emptying garbage cans. A faint noise behind me. Every muscle in my body locked up as I froze. It was subtle but distinct, weeping, broken, but not hysterical or loud. "Hi there," my voice echoed off the glass walls and cracked. Not a word. It wasn't anything, I assured myself. The pipes, perhaps a TV in the office was left on. However, the sound returned, this time more clearly, after I switched off my vacuum. The sob of a woman. I snuck toward the sound, clutching the mop handle like a weapon. It took me to the largest office on the floor, the corner office. The door was ajar. "Hi there." The room was empty as I pushed it wider, but the crying was still there. I promise everything. It sounded as clear as day to me. However, nobody was present, only a leather chair facing the window, a spotless desk, with the blinds pulled. It made my skin crawl. With my heart thumping like a drum, I slowly retreated. The door slammed shut at that moment. I will always remember what comes next. The handle gave a violent twist. I screamed from inside and bolted down the corridor. Lights began to go out one by one behind me. Click, click, click. Darkness is chasing me. And that sobbing became a wail over it all. Not human, not even close. My thumb got numb after I pressed the elevator button so hard. I slammed the lobby button and jumped in as soon as the doors slid open. There was a whisper in my ear as the elevator went down. 2 words, breath across my neck, moist and cold. "Stay longer." I hurried past Frank as soon as the foyer doors opened. He remarked, "You're done early," without raising his gaze. "Did you?" I said in a tremulous voice. "Have you heard?" His eyes were dark when he finally turned to face me. "Compared to others, you survived longer." The following morning, I gave up. 3 years have passed. Years. Life is better now that I'm 40 miles away. However, on some evenings when I wake up 3 a.m, I can still hear it, I promise. Stay longer, the whisper, the tears, and occasionally I ponder what could have transpired if I had.